And we're going across to be joined by independent researcher Mariam Jooma-Çarikci. We're talking against the background of a Palestinian Canadian professional engineer, Dr. Bahira Abdul Salam, who was scheduled to appear on the 22nd of June before a regulatory body, which is the Professional Engineers Ontario Disciplinary Proceeding. And apparently, this had to do with a speech that has actually sparked a bias against the engineering regulator. Mariam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Juma Mubarak to you and welcome.
Walaikum salam. Jazakallah so much, Uncle Inay. Thank you.
Yes, wonderful as always having you. Let's just talk about the case of Dr. Bahira Abdul Salam versus the Professional Engineers Ontario, which is a regulatory body.
Yes, so just to correct there, Dr. Bahira is actually an Egyptian-Canadian engineer. And what is happening right now is that she has been facing a disciplinary proceeding with, as you mentioned, the Professional Engineers of Ontario, a regulatory body that oversees engineers in the area. And it came from her social media post that basically expressed solidarity with Palestinians. And the interesting thing about this, though, is that the complaint is not related to anything to do with her work as an engineer. In fact, it was a complaint submitted by the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation, which is basically, I guess, the equivalent here of what we would have the Jewish Board of Deputies in South Africa. So essentially, there's no allegation concerning her engineering competence, whether she had done, whether her work had included any fraud or if there was any technical misconduct or negligence. This whole case centers purely around political expression. And I think this distinction is so important because professional regulators exist to protect the public, but they're not there to police our political beliefs. And this is essentially what's happened in the case of Dr. Abdul Salam, and is incredibly tragic because she has no legal counsel, and she's representing herself at these hearings. And that has taken an incredible toll, I think, as one can imagine, on how the evidence gets presented, and just essentially around the whole asymmetry of power. So she's up against, very competent lawyers in the case of those who are representing the engineering society, and is essentially trying to prove that freedom of speech as a professional should not be criminalized.
Well, absolutely, Miriam. But also, I think, the piece that I've seen actually refers to Dan Abrams, who is the chief licensing officer of PEO. And, looking at some of his posts and LinkedIn as well, where in his own words, there have been a number of quotations as far as, some of the key issues that will form a part of the central questions in Dr. Abdul Salam's proceedings.
Absolutely, absolutely. So here is where we talk about, the allegation of reasonable apprehension of bias. And in South Africa, we have the same concept in our legal system that anyone who has, if there is reasonable doubt as to whether the person could be biased against the person in question, that they should be recused from the case. And this is where we have sufficient evidence. I mean, as you say, it's on LinkedIn, it's written, it's out there, it's public. It's not a case of having to guess what the ideological position or persuasions are of this particular person, Dan Abrams. And the fact that he's actually part of the proceedings and he'll be, influencing the decision as to whether or not Dr. Abdul Salam suffers consequences for her social media posts is absolutely outrageous. So in the sense that Dan Abrams has been public about his posts, however, Dr. Abdul Salam when she makes a statement, it's seen as anti-Semitic, whereas the references that they've made to Palestinian supporters, using words like thugs and almost condoning violence that would come towards supporters of Palestine or solidarity activists, essentially means that some voices are criminalized and others are actually encouraged. And essentially, we as when I say we, I mean solidarity, not just activists, but as people of conscience, we need to understand, or we need to ask ourselves: are professionals allowed to express their political opinions without fearing professional discipline? Because this is essentially the heart of the case. It's to silence. It's to create that chilling effect. It's to act as a warning against others, to say, your reputation, your profession, essentially everything you've built up materially can all come crumbling down if you dare to speak in support of Palestine.
Yes, and also, Mariam, I think what's important to understand is the organization called CAEF, which is the Canadian Anti-Semitism Education Foundation, because this piece talks about the complaint against Dr. Abdul Salam was not filed by a client, colleague, or an engineering industry body. It was filed by Andrea Spindle, who identified herself as the executive director at CAEF, which obviously has got somewhat of a history as far as some of these matters are concerned, the nature of the complaints as well. And also, I think it does make reference to another case as well, the Mona Aish case.
Right. So what CAEF is, as we suggested earlier, is basically an organization that defends the Israeli position on Zionism, and it equates Zionism and anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and it basically works to petition do public events and do advocacy campaigns and so on, but also to basically police how Zionism is portrayed in the public and how it's understood. And essentially what it does is it seeks to create a monolith understanding of what Zionism is. And I mean, as we know, at this point, Zionism is essentially racism, the way in which we had experienced under apartheid, and even worse. So there is no way that we can defend that. And why this particular organization is central to the case is because its executive director had filed a complaint against Dr. Abdul Salam, and it had submitted the additional evidence. Now at this point, we have to ask, how is it that an organization designed to combat anti-Semitism is allowed to influence a professional regulatory body's proceedings? I mean, to the extent of having an engineer, a professional engineer, who was actually honored by the very same body that's now that she's facing a hearing against. How is it able to influence such a body when it's got nothing to do with the technical experience of being an engineer or her work? So this also speaks to the power asymmetry, as we said before, of these networks and the way in which, just in general, Western media has allowed the dehumanization of Palestinians, of Arabs, of Muslims, to the extent that it's actually normal. And this comes to the question of media coverage, and why I'm so pleased that Salam Media has actually taken up this topic, because there's been very little media coverage of this case. So at the moment, the proceedings are adjourned until August. Hopefully, Dr. Bahia will find good counsel in that time. But essentially, this entire case speaks to, as I said, the chilling of political expression and any solidarity with Palestine.
Well, certainly, and Mariam, I think this is important because once again, Yes, Salam Media is carrying this story, but we've seen very little. And I've also seen that, there have been, in the statement that was issued, providing media context, interview requests, because this is a case which has got far reaching consequences as well. And considering that now that it has been adjourned, but also in terms of what her representatives are actually calling for, the total withdrawal of these allegations against Dr. Abdul Salam.
Yes, and the fact that there is no zero to no media coverage is the story in itself. What the kind of forces that are at play trying to undermine Dr. Bahia's public expression are the same forces that bear down upon journalists. So this is not to say that journalists are necessarily uninterested, but there is a self-censorship happening because of the consequences of reporting on Palestine and solidarity with Palestine. We've seen so many reporters be fired across, the world for having said anything, or if not fired, then basically, given other forms of, in quotes, punishment for their views. So I think it's also important for us to contextualize how important this particular case is, not just for engineers, not just for professionals, not just for the idea of delinking anti-Semitism and Zionism, and anti-Zionism, but actually understanding the weight of the policing of our views, of political belief, simply for standing on the side of justice.
Well, Mariam, Jazakallah khairan so much for that, and as always for your time with us right here on Assalam Media. We certainly will follow developments. We'll follow the case as well. As you mentioned, it's been adjourned for August. So, inshallah, at some point in time, we definitely will do a follow up. But for now, we thank you. Have yourself a great Jummah as well. It is a day of Ashura as well. So, a double bonus. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam and thank you.
Mariam Jooma-Çarikci, independent researcher. And with that, we're going to go for a break. We come back, another interesting dynamic and a take ahead of June the 30th. And we'll be joined by Amir Muhammad Khadimang, the Amir of the Gauteng Muslim Shura Council, weighing in with their take and their views as far as Muslims are concerned in terms of our responsibility to engage with realities, with honesty, with justice, with wisdom, and with compassion as well, and reinforcing what is our commitment to truth and justice, particularly in the light of what we are going to see, or what we will be witnessing comes June the 30th. And we see a lot playing out in the background. UXA meeting with March and March, the 22 organizations that issued a statement, but another dynamic and a very interesting take, I must say, coming with Amir Muhammad Khadiming very shortly.